Jonah chapter 1. Running from God. Not good. Jonah chapter 2. Running to God. All right, back on track. Jonah chapter 3, running with God. Oh, Jonah chapter 3 is a great chapter of the Bible. In fact, after studying it so long, I think maybe Jonah chapter 3 is one of the greatest chapters in the Bible. Jonah chapter 3, right? He gets it right. Jonah finally, in obedience, says, yes, Lord, okay, I'll go to Nineveh. And he goes to Nineveh. And he preaches an 8-word sermon. 8 words. And they listen. And it gets them. And it says they believed God, and the whole city, about 1 million-ish, the whole city repents and turns to God. That's amazing. That is amazing. In fact, I want to suggest to you, it is the greatest spiritual revival ever recorded in human history. 1 million people coming to Jesus. In fact, from my perspective, maybe one of the greatest miracles recorded in human history. And it all came from Jonah. Through Jonah. So cool. So I want you to know that Jonah walks away from Nineveh as a celebrity. He walks away from the city as a preaching celebrity. He does. In fact, God did some things there in Nineveh and gave Jonah so much success as a preacher, more success than any of the prophets ever have before. He goes and preaches, and Nineveh's saved, and there's rejoicing in Nineveh, and there's rejoicing in heaven. Remember the Bible saying, there is so much rejoicing in heaven when just one repents and comes to the Lord, right? Well, what in the world is happening in heaven when 1 million people come? Whew. And you talk about a party. It's got to be crazy up there. And it all came through Jonah. And so I want you to know that Jonah walks out of the city shouting, Lord, you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abounding in love. A God who relents at sending calamity. Isn't that a great verse? Glorious, right? Praise and celebration, right? I mean, joy and jubilation, right? Right? All right, the lights are bright. I didn't know if anybody's out there or not. Wrong. Wrong. And this is where the story of Jonah gets really weird. In fact, Jonah chapter 4 is one of the main reasons I have never liked this dude. Let's walk through Jonah chapter 4, shall we? 11 verses. Let's just walk through the chapter, and I'm giving you a heads up right now. It's going to get weird in here. But Jonah, verse 1, but Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. Jonah seen that this was very wrong, and he became angry. Okay, well, wait a minute. Back up. We left him in chapter 3. The last verse in chapter 3 is, when God saw that the Ninevites repented, they turned from their evil ways, God relented and didn't send the destruction that he threatened. Next verse. But to Jonah, that seemed very wrong, and he became angry. What? 1 million people come to Jesus, and the preacher responds in anger? Something is very wrong. Wouldn't you agree? Look at verse 2. He prayed to the Lord. Okay, well, good. At least they're still talking. Because in Jonah chapter 1, they weren't talking. He prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee from Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious God, full of compassion," right? slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Listen, Jonah is not shouting praise to God. No, Jonah's yelling at God. He's mad at God. He's cussing mad at God. Something is seriously wrong. Look at verse 3. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. Huh? He is so mad. He is so angry. He would rather die. I mean, if the Ninevites are going to be saved, I'd rather die than live to see it. In fact, he is so mad, he's even having unhealthy thoughts about his own life. Verse 4. But the Lord replied, have you any right to be angry? Good one, Lord. Jonah, do you have any right to be angry? Look at verse 5. Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city where he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. He's still hoping that it's going to burn, isn't he? Look at verse 6 and 7. Then the Lord God provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort, and Jonah was very happy about the plant. Now, I want you to take notice that in the whole book of Jonah, this is the only time we find him happy about a plant. Now, notice he's not thankful for it. He's just happy about it. The only time he's happy about a plant. Now, look at verse 7. I think verse 7 is one of my favorites. Check this out. This is interesting. Verse 7. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the vine, the plant, so that it withered. Okay, I had to go and dig a little deeper about this worm. Do you realize there is an African earthworm that the average size is 8 feet long? And they can grow. They have been found up to 22 feet long. That's not a worm. That's a snake. And that's disgusting. And he ate the plant, overnight. He was hungry. Look at verse 8. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. Jonah's burning on the inside and on the out. He forgot his sunscreen on this trip, it appears. He wanted to die and said, it would be better for me to die than to live. What a baby. Verse 9, but God said to Jonah, do you have a right to be angry about the plant? I am so angry, I wish I were dead. I mean, seriously, what a baby, right? I'll tell you, he's in a bad place. And sometimes preachers, even preachers, are in a bad place. Look at verse 10. But the Lord said, you have been concerned about this plant. The word concern is also the same word as compassion. Jonah, you've been compassionate about this plant. Though you did not tend it nor make it grow, it sprang up overnight and it died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh? It's the same word. Should I not be compassionate about the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell the right hand from their left? Probably a reference to the small children who don't know better yet. Should I not be compassionate about the great city that has at least 120,000 kiddos in it and also many animals? And that's the end of the book? Can you end a book with a question mark? Luann, you're an English major. Is that cool? I don't think it's cool. That's how you end a book? That's just a weird way to end a book, if you ask me. It's such a weird way to end a book. But let's not get bogged down with that. Let's just go on. Let's not get bogged down about that. However, let me just say this. Jonah was still expected to answer the question. So you have Jonah chapter 4. What are you thinking? I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Jonah's got issues. Right? Jonah's got mad issues. Jonah chapter 1, he's running from God. Jonah chapter 2, he's running to God. Okay, back on track. Jonah chapter 3, he's running with God for a time. Yes. And now Jonah chapter 4, he is so running against God. Against God. Here's what I want to do, and it's going to seem a little bit odd at first, but I want you to know it's very intentional, and it's so therapeutic. All right? Here's what I want to do. I would love for us to bash Jonah a bit. Come on, it's going to be fun. It's going to be so therapeutic. At least for me, it's going to be so therapeutic. I mean, what is his deal? Seriously, what is Jonah's problem? How do you say it? What's his problem? Selfish. He's nuts. Ungrateful. Shameful. Egotistical. I love it when it rhymes. Arrogant. He wants revenge. What is his deal? Doesn't it feel good just to get it out? So therapeutic. I want you to know that Jonah is so self-absorbed. And I want you to know that Jonah is self-deceived. And when you back up a little bit and look at Jonah, you're going to realize, especially in chapter 4, he is arrogant. He is apathetic. He could care less about anybody else. And he is so full of anger. And here's the deal. Boil it all down. Jonah is living with a sense of superiority. He thinks he's better. When he looks at the Ninevites, he looks at them and says, they're not worthy. Oh, I of course am. But they're not. And he's living with a sense of superiority. He thinks he's better than them. Jonah, let me ask you a question. Which is worse? A disobedient pagan living totally ignorant of the word and will of God, or a disobedient preacher fully aware of the word and will of God? Which is worse? He is living with a sense of superiority. He thinks he's better. And I want you to know he's living with a sense of entitlement. The only thing he's ever happy about in this story is that plant. It wasn't even his. He didn't even grow it. He didn't tend it. It was just there. And man, did he turn angry and bitter at God when God took it away. Because he had a sense of entitlement. And that's how he lived. And here's some things that are obvious. Here's what I know. Here's some things that are obvious. Number one, Jonah valued his own want over the will of God. Do you see that? In this story, it is so clear that Jonah valued his own want over and above the will of God. Jonah didn't care for or about the Ninevites, and he didn't want them saved. It didn't matter that God wanted them saved. He didn't. Jonah didn't realize, 2 Peter chapter 3 says this, God's not slow, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting any one of us to perish, but all of us to come to repentance. But Jonah didn't care that God wanted them saved. And he chose his own want over what? Over the will of God. The second thing I think is so obvious about Jonah, Jonah valued his own comfort over the call of God. Remember, God says, I want you going to Nineveh. And he said, no, I think I'm going to Tarshish. There's a beach at Tarshish. I'm going to enjoy ministry there way better, right? Everything's better at the beach, right? I mean, there's a reason why you live here too. Oops. But he valued his own comfort more than the call of God. And the third thing I think is so obvious, Jonah valued his possessions over God's people. He was more concerned about that plant than he was a city of 1 million people. And so he demonstrates superior living. He feels superior and he feels entitled. And so here's what I know. Jonah's got issues. But he's not the only one with issues, is he? Would you believe that I know some church people who have very clearly valued their own want over the will of God. I mean, they clearly know what God says about a subject. They clearly know what he says, and they choose what they want to do anyway. Can you believe that? And I know some church people who have made some major decisions, life decisions, that was really to secure their own comfort, and they totally ignored the call of God. Can you believe that? And I know some people, some Christian people, church people, who seem to value their own possessions more than the people of God. Can you believe that? I mean, I've seen Christian people kind of put off, kind of look like they value their possessions way more than they value God. And they put a lot of value in their toys, and their boats, and their Jeeps, and their to-do list, and their agendas, right? And their portfolios, and their bank accounts, and their pets, and their sports. Shall I go on? Please stop, right? Can I remind you today that anytime you value something more than you value the Lord, it's idolatry? If you are running from God, that means you're running to something else. That's idolatry. If you are saying no to God, that means you're saying yes to something else, and that's idolatry. And I want you to know one of the greatest lessons we can learn from Jonah is that idolatry will take you down, right? Idolatry, valuing something over and above God, idolatry, valuing something else will take you down in this life and the life to come. And here's what I learned from Jonah chapter 4. If you're guilty of idolatry, you will be angry. You'll be angry. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a good side of anger. There's a good side of anger, and the right side of anger is when you're angry about the things that anger God. But let's be honest. Most of the anger you and I face, it's not righteous indignation, is it? It's selfish, sinful anger, which is, by the way, just a symptom that reveals that we too are living a life of superiority and living with a sense of entitlement. Jonah's got issues, but he's not the only one. In fact, I heard a preacher one time say, if you've been a Christian for more than 5 years, you need to get over it. And I'm like, what? And then I was like, ouch. Because here's what he was getting at. If you've been a Christian for more than 5 years, the natural tendency is for you to level out at comfort. Too often, you and I get too comfortable. And when we overcommit to our own comfort and our own convenience, we're going to be blinded to the will and the call of God. And we will begin to live out of a sense of superiority and a sense of entitlement. And here's what's been really bothering me here lately. I'm just like him. I'm just like Jonah. He is me. When Jonah looked at the Ninevites, he was like, I don't like them. And Jonah would say, I don't like them because they're so disobedient. They have really bad attitudes. They disrespect God, and they have zero compassion on the rest of the world around them. Therefore, they don't deserve the grace of God, and they don't deserve my time. That's what I've been saying about Jonah. I don't like the dude. Remember me saying that? And you remember me saying why I don't like the dude? I don't like the dude because he's disobedient. He has a bad attitude. He disrespects God, and he has zero compassion for the people around him. And he doesn't deserve my time. And I told you, for the best part of 30 years, I have never preached through the book of Jonah. I've been avoiding him. He is me. I think I'm going to be sick. And I'm sorry. Church, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Is it hot in here? I think I need some shade. Shade in the story represented the grace of God. I think I need some shade. I need a place the rest. I need more grace. Sometimes preachers need more grace. As we bring this series to a close, I got a couple questions for you. The first question is, how do we even know about this story? How do we even know the story of Jonah anyway? I'll tell you how we know about it. He wrote it down for us. Do you realize Jonah wrote Jonah? So here's my second question. Why in the world would Jonah write an autobiography about himself that only makes himself look like the backside of a donkey? You know what I'm saying? Why would he do that? Why would he write a story about himself that only highlights his issues? My conclusion is it's because he got it. I think he thought about that last question God gave him. He thought about it and he got it. You remember the last question God answered, right, in the book? Jonah, should I not have compassion for this whole city? And I think he got it. I think in reflection, he got it. He realized God's grace isn't just for me, it's for everyone. It's not just for me, it's not just for the Jews, it's for the Gentiles too. It's for the Ninevites too. I think he got it. I think he got it. In fact, the reason I'm pretty sure he got it is the only way he would have been empowered to write it down, the only way he would have been okay with the whole world knowing his story is if he rested in the grace of God. He knew he had it, he knew he received it, and he was resting. The only way you're going to confess your mess is if you know they're going to accept you regardless. And he knew, and he got it. Therefore, I need you to hear this. I'm repentant. I'm a changed man. You will never, ever, ever hear me say about Jonah, I don't like this dude. On the contrary. In fact, through the last couple of months, I've grown to love him. I love this bro. I love this bro. And I owe an apology. In fact, when I get to heaven, the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, I'm going to spend some time with the Lord. And it's going to be awesome, and I hope it's for years. But I'm going to spend time with the Lord. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around making sure you made it. I'm going to make sure you made it. But then I'm going to beeline it to Jonah. First, I'm going to get his autograph, and then I am going to apologize. I love this bro. I love this bro. It's so genius. This book is so genius. He wrote his whole story, his story, showing all of his issues so that you and I would see ourselves in this story and be so disgusted with our own arrogance and apathy and anger. It's genius. In fact, I'm convinced Jonah on purpose wrote in a way that I wouldn't like him at first, just so that I would see my own guilt. It's so genius. So genius. And here's what I know. The greater your understanding and appreciation of the grace of God that was required to save you will spring up a greater desire for everyone else to know about it too. But the more shallow you are in understanding the grace of God, the more angry you'll be with others around you. You know, Jesus left the comfort of his own home, heaven, to go to his Nineveh. And he went to a world, a wicked, wicked, evil world that did not deserve his presence. And he was obedient to the Father, even obedient to death on a cross. And he went to a cross. And he died for our arrogance and our apathy and our anger. He died to save us from our mess. Yeah, it is all about his grace. And friends, I want to encourage you to receive it. I want you to believe it. I want you to live it. I want you to trust it. And I want you resting in his amazing grace. And let's allow the desire to build within for everyone else around us to know about it. Amen?